So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this one is going to be another custom scenario. This one was made by Lord Belaghost, and the description for which I'm going to post in the video description below, purely because it is actually an historical battle, with obviously within the setting of Middle-earth. So I feel as though, you know, the full description would be best off placed down there rather than me trying to stumble through it. But essentially this is going to be between the forces of Morgoth and then obviously the Noldor, the Elves, so this is a pretty early battle, much earlier than the Third Age battles that we usually do anyway. So the Elves, this I think historically was a fairly convincing victory for the Elves, and just having a look at the armies and sort of the overall feel of this, I can certainly tell that the Elves are almost certainly going to win this, because it's a 4v2 in favour of Imladris, and Imladris' armies are very, very elite, so if it turns out to be a complete bloodbath in favour of the Elves, please do not shout at me. Just don't do it. It really bums me out, and I don't want to put up with it. And most people, you know, only really complain when the Orcs roll over the other factions, but I would hope that because this is the Elves that it sort of isn't quite so harsh. But this is a custom scenario, and I do like showing off the custom scenarios because people do put effort and work into the maps and the compositions, and obviously in this case as well, sort of following some sort of historical setting, so I do want to show it. This is also a fairly brief one for a scenario anyway, in terms of 50, just sort of shy of 16k. You know, most scenarios do tend to run significantly longer than that, but based on the openness of the map and the compositions that are involved, I don't think that is going to be the case this time around. Regardless, we'll go through the Elves first of all. We'll start off with Lord Finrod Felagund over here. So he's got this sort of lower encampment over here, the cliff sort of guarding this way, but he's going to have to deal with a direct assault from the Orcs of Angmar, who are going to be sort of taking on the role of Angband, I think, under the control of Morgoth in this fight. So we've got some Noratirno warriors, as well as several units of Eldar Makar as well, so they have got the armour upgrade. The Noratirno warriors are also pretty decent in melee, certainly better than the Eldar Quinga at any rate. The Eldar Makar with the armour upgrade, however, should be able to trade very nicely with a lot of the Orc units, as well as several units of Imladris sentries over here. We also have some Eldar Atar with those spears, some Imladris Blade Masters also, more Eldar Atar, and the Blade Masters in the centre of the camp as well. The camp obviously a fairly decent defensible position, but Angmar will be able to sort of claim the high ground here. More Atar, more Eldar Makar as well as some Imladris sentries, and sort of that's the overall feel of the army anyway. So there's some Imladris sentries, there's a few Blade Masters, mostly Noratirno warriors and Eldar Makar, but there are also a few elite units as well, like the God Helim, and obviously the Elder Enway Harry Vital as well. The God Helim, of course, being a very strong archer in melee, very, very strong indeed. The second Elven army we have is Chisholm 21, so he's got some Heru Makeel. He has also got some Eldar Heru Quinga over here. Very good in melee and at range, of course. Imladris sentries, more Imladris sentries. Overall, I think a little bit more quality in this army, perhaps, with Blade Masters and sentries, and also the Elder Enway units being a little bit more sort of scattered throughout his encampment. He's also got some Imladris riders to sort of go out into the trees and potentially try and hunt down the forces of Angmar which wait within. More riders as well, and then finally over here we do have some Imladris Guardians actually with the armour upgrade as well. And obviously again a very, very strong unit. As far as line infantry goes, certainly in 0.96 anyway, they may be the strongest that aren't sort of getting into the bodyguard tiers, particularly when you upgrade their armour. It might change a little bit in 0.97, obviously Numenor sort of throwing their hat into the ring. There's also Khazad-dûm, who are the ever-presents when it comes to having very strong infantry. And then we have the sort of reinforcing armies of Elves, starting off with the Bewildered Krogan. Nice name. Imladris Guardians without the armour upgrade, Eldar Makar that do. More Guardians in the back here, a little bit scattered all over the hills, but I'm not sure. Obviously we'll probably see when they are allowed to be committed, when they start to move into position. To be fair, these armies over here do look a little bit more scattered, and while they do have some elite units, it does look as though they don't have full stacks at the very least. So it might not be quite so bad in those terms. Eldar Quinga, Imladris Sentinels, another unit of Imladris Sentinels, and then at the back, something which the forces of Angmar will certainly have to look out for, the Gwaithir Rogdor. In 0.97, the testing, where they've been renamed the Doomsmen of Vardar, they are almost certainly the strongest knights in the game. Not necessarily true in 0.96, but they are still one of the strongest. As long as they stay clear of any Witch Realm Inquisitors that may be around, they should be able to act with impunity as well. And then the final of the 4 Elven forces today, we have BMK Overlord of the Dark Cloud. He's got some Imladris Guardians, he's also got some Noratirno warriors, a couple of units of, a couple of units from Imladris Blade Masters, Elder Enway Harry Makeel and Imladris Guardians, and then yet more cavalry. So Noritier, no cavalry, which admittedly is not the strongest of the Imladris Cav, but even so, more units that Angmar have to be worried about. The Haru Myro, which are most certainly a very deadly lancer, and then another unit of Gwaithir Rockdor as well. So, we'll now move into the Orcish forces, which are going to be on the field today, starting off with Inarius, who is going to be playing as the force which finds themselves sandwiched, really, in between the elves and the encampment and then the reinforcements. So he's got some Witch Realm Inquisitors, which again, going to be very, very important. His general is here. They're going to need to be on the watch for those Gwaithir Rockdor as they move forward. A couple of units of Blackwatch Legion as well, which not sure how useful a pushing unit is going to be here. It's a little bit more open. If they sort of try and get into the camp as quickly as they possibly can, these units may very well be quite useful. And understandably, the Angmar armies are quite elite because they are having to deal with 4 pretty decent quality Imladris armies. So they're going to need all the help they can get, quite frankly, Angmar, if they're going to have any success in this fight. We also have some Witch Realm Blackguard and some Witch Realm Hammerguard. Again, not too surprising to see the deadly duo in action today. In fact, we've got 2 units of Hammerguard. Hammerguard going to be useful for their AP, of course. Again, this is going to be necessary because Angmar have got... They're at such a disadvantage when it comes to facing off against Imladris. The balance of power may be even, but that is going to be taking into account all of Angmar's quality units, whereas I feel as though all of the elves that are going to be reinforcing from the hills are going to be a very real threat. Obviously, we have the Trolls of Angmar as well. Nice shields on them. We've also got several units of the Guardians of Khan Doom without the armour upgrade, but even so, they're still a very solid mainline unit that won't die easily. They will struggle to trade efficiently with stuff like Imladris Guardians, but they should be able to manage going up against Eldar Makar at the very least. And then several units of Snaga. Obviously, Angmar, this is more to give them some sort of ranged presence, I feel, more so than anything else, because Angmar's ranged options are terrible. Obviously, they are literally the worst in the game. Several units of Snaga, they should be able to do some sort of decent harassment, but they're definitely going to be reliant on their melee prowess here. And they've also got some Walks, some Walk Riders, which, again, going to be useful for trying to zone out that cav. And also the Gundabad Guard will also be useful in the same vein. They'll be much better at 0.97. The Gundabad Guard, you'll probably see more of them when people have free choice of what to pick, because they will be a lot more worthwhile when it comes to sort of weighing them up against the Guardians of Khan Doom. Then finally, the final army is of course going to be the Scenario Creator, who's going to be Lord Belagost. He's over here, he's got some Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, who, not bad in melee, they are without the armour upgrade here. But yeah, I mean, they're not AP, even though they are using axes, because of course dual wielding axe units are no longer AP. But they will be able to get into melee and actually hold their own, provided they're supported. Again, they're also very vulnerable to arrow fire, however, so Belagost is going to have to be on the watch for that. Speaking of which, we do have the Blackwatch Legion. They're going to be pushing forward at the front, obviously with the Guardians of Khan Doom trying to absorb any arrow fire that comes his way. He too has got some Snaga, he too has got pretty much the same composition, I think. A couple of Hammer Guard, Blackguard, several units of Blackwatch Legion, and several units of Snaga Archers. Actually, he's got 3 units of Hammer Guard. He also has some Walk Skirmishers as opposed to the Witch Realm Inquisitors. But I suppose he doesn't need so much cavalry on this side. That's going to be more of a concern for Inarius on the other side than several units of Scourge Raiders. So it's a very elite army, of course, 2 very elite armies from Angmar. But I would still very squarely place this fight in favour of the elves. So, without further ado, let's begin. Let's see if Morgoth's forces can pull off a miracle here and defeat the representation of the Noldor in their encampments, and then deal with the onrushing force of cavalry as well. So it is going to be very important, obviously, I think, for Angmar to very quickly try and crush these 2 elven armies that are in these encampments, because they can certainly manage that with the forces that they've got, the brute force that they're bringing to the floor to the fore today. They are going to be able to take the encampments at the very least. But I feel as though the reinforcements, particularly with all the cavalry running around it's going to be difficult for Angmar, most certainly. But perhaps the saving grace is that a few newer players are in. Obviously, I've never really seen the Bewildered Krogan in a replay before, so that may very well act in favour of Angmar today. Chisholm I have seen, but not so often. I think he is a relatively new player as well. Finrod Felagund I've seen a few times, so yeah, I mean, perhaps. I mean, Angmar are going to have to certainly be at the top of their game here, but we do have the Imladris Riders here, getting ready to position themselves. The Imladris Guardians certainly forward a little bit more so. We've also got more Imladris Guardians over in the hills, which I missed, as well as some Herun Quinga. You can see here that Inarius' forces are going to be heading towards, but I think the first engagements may actually be between Belagost and Finrod over here in this encampment, which is not so great for this Imladris force because they are sort of boxed in here in this canyon. Their encampment is down here, nice and sheltered from the elements, but unfortunately not going to be so sheltered from the low quality arrows of the Snaga, and you can see that Finrod is actually already going to sort of vacate his camp pretty much entirely to try and take up a more advantageous position on this higher ground, which again is very understandable. But while he does this, the Snaga are going to have free rein to shoot into this blob as they move, but most of the more heavily armoured units of Imladra should be able to weather this storm just fine, although the Noreturno warrior is taking a bit of damage there as the Snaga start to chip away at the forces of the Noldor. Noreturno warriors taking up position on this hill, obviously. And this is going to be the problem for Angmar, because while they are getting some kills as Finrod sort of repositions his army, unfortunately for them, they need to be the proactive ones here. The longer they wait, the more likely it is that the Imladra's reinforcing armies are going to be what makes the difference. As soon as those units of Elven Knights and Elven Lancers get into the fray, it's going to be pretty messy, I think, for Angmar. As Finrod continues to abandon his encampment, you can also see the Warg skirmishes over here. And while he's moving, to be honest, I mean, again, all of these Elven archers that were here are not going to be able to sort of return fire onto the Warg skirmishes, so they're going to be able to get some pretty decent kills, particularly on units like Eldarenwe Heru Hatal. That will be a very nice target indeed, as the Warg skirmishers up on the top of that hill. Now we can see a few of the javelins starting to come in, and the javelins, of course, AP, much more deadly than the low quality arrows of the Snaga. But I think the first melee engagements we're going to see are going to be between Inarius and the forces of Chisholm over here. And Inarius needs to press the attack, because while he does have a lot of plentiful Snaga, I feel as though his best bet is just to sort of get into melee as quickly as possible. I mean, to be fair, it is a lot of strength that Imladras have got on this front line over here, but I don't think they've got too much of a choice. If they sit at range too much, they're just going to get bled out slowly. There's a lot of Snaga, which of course in 0.96.1, low tier archers like this can be very, very efficient. But against this sort of elven force, I'm not so sure personally. Well, Finrod over on the other side, his army's still sort of moving. The Imladra sentry is certainly proving to be the target of the Snaga's wrath so far, and that is certainly the best target to go after, because while they do have good armour, no shields, no hit points, excellent choice. And Finrod is sort of being made to pay a little bit here for sort of his repositioning up onto this hill. But I feel as though ultimately it is going to be the right call, because sitting in that valley would have given Angmar the height advantage, which they couldn't really afford to do. Meanwhile, getting the Imladra's riders out from the flank. Unfortunately though, the Warg riders not good against horse archers. They can be kited all day long. Next to nothing in terms of their armour value, so once their hit points are gone, they get shredded. The Witchrealm Inquisitors will be able to stand up to a bit more punishment, but unfortunately for them, they're just going to be kited away from the action. We'll see what Inarius does here. It looks as though he's going to try and reposition and shift over to hit Finrod's army in the back, which means that Angmar could still sandwich them, which I do like a little bit, because it will force Chisholm to react a little bit. It will force him to try and come to the aid of his ally, because we can see here Eldar Atar being forced to retreat as Lord of Balagost is starting to get some of his infantry into the fray. We also have the Guardians of Khan Doom. I think actually it's probably a good idea if we go down to half speed here. Here we can see the Eldar Atar just trying to retreat back behind their archer line, interestingly enough. So I think Finrod definitely needs to get a sort of a more readily available front line sort of set up. I mean, I'm actually a little bit surprised that Balagost has not committed forward more infantry, because I think Finrod could be here for the taking, especially seeing as Inarius' army is on the way over as well. And at the very least, they could be able to potentially kill off one of the Elven forces at the very least. Some Warg skirmishes out here on the flank, which their javelins again going to be very, very important. Looks as though the Noreturno warriors being interrupted in melee by the odd unit of orcs, which are charging through their lines, which is unfortunate, because those Warg skirmishers are the exact target which these Noreturno warriors need to be going after. Meanwhile, this is a pretty impressive catch as well, I think. Inarius coming over here. Chisholm, he sort of was kiting them back, but when he sort of reached the edge of the map, he didn't then sort of reposition his forces to keep kiting them, and unfortunately this is going to be the end of the Imladras riders. They do not stand a chance against the Witchrealm Inquisitors in melee, and even the Warg riders will be able to trade very nicely with horse archers in melee. So this is a good catch. I mean, initially I thought this was an engagement which was going to go against Inarius, but as it turns out, doing very well here, taking these horse archers out, and then he's going to be able to potentially pressure the infantry lines. And having a look at Chisholm's infantry, they're still far too static. He should be able to see which way the wind is blowing here, because Finrod is about to get a very rude awakening indeed, as all of this infantry and the trolls, of course, are going to be moving across as well. Trolls of Gundabad and Trolls of Angmar Finrod is going to be feeling the pressure, surely. However, Belagost's overall lack of infantry on the front line may very well turn out to hurt him as well. The Guardians of Khan Dûm are coming in, and I do sing the praises of the Guardians of Khan Dûm quite a lot, and rightly so. They are a good front line unit, especially when it comes to comparing them to other equivalents that the Orcs have available too. But they are not going to be the match of the Imladris Blade Masters, especially not when they have support from ranged units right behind them. The Eldar Atar are right here as well, which could obviously lend their support in melee too. The Eldar Makar, on the other hand, I would actually back the Guardians of Khan Dûm here. Their armour should be enough to see them through here, and also their superior numbers, of course. Eldar Makar will be able to trade very nicely with most other line infantry units, but the Guardians of Khan Dûm are a bit of an exception there. I feel as though they can certainly weather the storm. The Guardians of Khan Dûm are fairly expensive though. Any line infantry unit which costs around the 700 mark, you're really dishing out the money for. Meanwhile, the Trolls are coming in here. This unit of Eldar Makar is going to get absolutely smashed underfoot by the forces of Trolls which have been committed forward, and now also the Orcs are coming forth, and Chisholm's army is still unfortunately static, and this is going to leave Finrod really hanging him out to dry, which is unfortunate for him. The Wargs are going to retreat, however, because Finrod is now targeting them down, so it's very much the right thing to do, sort of retreat them. He has got a very nice front line set up over here, but the problem is he needs to have a nice front line set up over here, because this is where the real danger lies now, because Inarius is bringing his entire infantry force to bear. Balagost is also sort of positioning his forces. We also have the Snaga archers moving in. The Witch Realm Scourge Raiders potentially going to charge up the hill as well. Balagost does need to keep up the pressure on this side, however. The Trolls are continuing to push forward. The Trolls might be just the thing to fight those Imladris sentries off as well. But here comes Inarius' forces. This is good battlefield awareness, I think, from Inarius. He saw that he had the opportunity to sandwich Finrod as he sort of took up this position on this hill. Now it's up to Balagost to sort of move some additional forces in to try and help out, and the Scourge Raiders are on the way, which is good to see. More infantry coming in from the front, because the Guardians of Khan Dûm got butchered by the Imladris Blade Masters as expected. Over here, however, the Eldar Makar actually turning it around a little bit. The close proximity of all the ranged forces, probably not helping the Guardians of Khan Dûm's case. And now over here, the brute force of Angmar on display once again, charging in to the Imladris lines. Trolls doing a lot of damage here. The Blackwatch Legion also coming in, which again, going to be exactly the sort of thing which is going to be useful against the Pikes to disrupt their formation. They are going to get surrounded though by Eldarenwe Haru Fatal, which is not great for them. As I've said before, the Blackwatch Legion, while their use as sort of a line breaker is very, very handy. Obviously, people have debated sort of the merits of them being in the game before. I know that they're not everyone's favourite. But in melee, their stats are not brilliant, especially not against Eldarenwe units. They will not do so well. But the problem here is the Chaos. Obviously, the Chaos is going to suit Angmar far more than Imladris. You can see down here that Imladris Blade Masters chased a little bit too far. They're now surrounded really a little bit by the dual-wielding Axemen that are the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. Although some of them have a sword and an axe. In true Orc fashion, they aren't exactly sort of the most unified in terms of what weaponry they're using. But Chisholm needs to move his forces. They're too static. Don't you think as well? Oh, excuse me. Still, the final vestiges of my cold will not leave me. We do have those Imladris riders, which did manage to get away in the end. But this Imladris force is still far too static for my liking. They're sort of just holding their position in these trees. We also have the Warg skirmishers. So again, these mounted units are going to make it so that Chisholm, at the very least, will probably not want to go down this way and try and hit. It's a long way to march anyway, but I feel as though he does need to start moving to the aid of his ally, because you can see here that Finrod's army is unfortunately just being overwhelmed here. What have we here? And this battle is from the perspective of Finrod as well, so already he's lost half of his forces as Inarius' army sort of collapses upon him. See here, these Blackwatch Legion punched right through. The Trolls also, the Witch Realm Hammer Guard, the Black Guard are almost certainly in there as well, all backed up and shored up by Guardians of Khan Dûm. Belagost's forces at the moment, the only infantry he's really committed, a couple of units of Khan Dûm Guardians, and then the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders as well, just to keep the pressure up on all sides. And you can see that the rest of his army is sort of swinging out wide, and at this point as well on the minimap, we can see the committal of the Imladris reinforcement army. So BMK Overlord is moving, so too is the bewildered Krogan, and I would still say that Imladris have got this battle fairly well sewn up, even if Finrod's army will be utterly vanquished. I feel as though there's only so much that Angmar are going to be able to do against that very potent camp force, and ultimately the numbers that the elves have as well. It's going to take some pretty severe slip-ups for Angmar's good fortune in this battle to continue. The Eldar Atar, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Eldar Etar, obviously getting surrounded on all sides, not great for them. Again, more Eldar Etar coming in. Ever since they were the Linden Longspears way back in Vanilla, I've never been the biggest fan of this unit, to be honest with you. I feel as though Imladris have got better options elsewhere. But again, it is a scenario, so you have to make do with what you've got. Noratino Warriors trying to shoot into this big blob, but I think they're hitting the Blackwatch Legion, which one thing the Blackwatch Legion can most certainly do is absorb arrow fire. Good armour, but they have an enormous shield value, as I'm sure is obvious. And now, obviously, the Blackwatch Legion sort of crunching in here against the Noratino Warriors. But now, here comes BMK's cavalry, and the Witcher-Armed Blackguard, a little bit out in the open over here, but there are Gundabad Guard over here as well, so the Noratino cavalry are going to come charging in. But the Witcher-Armed Blackguard should be able to withstand a charge, at least one, and the Witcher-Armed Hammer Guard should also be able to do that, so the Noratino cavalry needs to get out of here really, because the Gundabad Guard with their spears, but also very high damage that the Hammer Guard and Blackguard are able to bring to the battle as well. Noratino cavalry obviously the lowest tier of all the Imladris camp, but here come the Heru Myro, which are much more potent. There goes Finrod's general, killed off by the Hammer Guard. The Heru Myro, I think, are outside of the non-general's bodyguard unit, so any unit which doesn't have multiple HP, I think they are the strongest lancer in the game. Here come the Trolls once again. Trolls have taken a bit of a beating, but then that's to be expected when you're going up against Imladris infantry. The death blob of Angmar has formed up. But over here you can see the Gwaithir Rockdoor, which are a very worrying sight. Here you can see some Snaga archers trying to move across. It's not going to go too well for them though. They're about to be mown down by this unit of Elven Knights. BMK's army, of course, was relatively small, all things considered, but you can see here the Gwaithir Arthan coming across. So Chisholm is now moving in to position. Eldarenwe Heru Myro also coming over here now. Again, it's the cavalry which is going to be the main problem, I think, here for Angmar. Their best hope really is to just form a blob and hope that they can absorb these charges, which is never the most inspiring way that you want to try and face down the unit of Gwaithir Rockdoor. And one of the Angmar armies has already lost half of his soldiers. There goes another general though. Witcher-Armed Blackguard there, killing off a general. Was that BMK's general? I doubt it. His general must be in the Gwaithir Rockdoor. That might have been Inarius's. Here comes the Scourge Raiders again, not the sort of unit which you really want taking charges from Eldarenwe Heru Myro if you can help it. There's a few units in the background as well, Guardians of Khan Doom. Blackwatch Legion still loitering. Again, the Blackwatch Legion are not the sort of unit which are great at taking cav charges either. Those Witcher-Armed Blackguard are starting to take a lot of damage as well from all of these cavalry charges, so the elves, eager to avenge the loss of one of their fallen armies, charging in once again to the Witcher-Armed Scourge Raiders. Witcher-Armed Scourge Raiders will have a ranged attack in the upcoming patch. They'll be quite similar in functionality to the Franenheim Berserkers, in an effort to sort of make them a little bit more of an attractive proposition to bring to the battle, because I feel as though they are a little bit too fragile for what they offer in 0.96. Gwaithir Arthan coming in. Oh, excuse me. Here come the Trolls, which, again, they've taken a lot of damage already. The Guardians of Khan Doom here. Inaria sort of forming up the shield wall. Balagost's army is here, but I think they just need to sort of commit and... I mean, they are breaking off the Noratino cavalry now, but you can see that BMK's army now bringing his archers into position, shooting from the higher ground, and that's not going to be great for them. Gwaithir Rockdoor charging in again, doing yet more damage to the Witcher-Armed Scourge Raiders. Gwaithir Arthan, a little bit isolated over here perhaps, but honestly they're so tanky, they can easily sort of fight their way out of this. Fighting back to back against Witcher-Armed Scourge Raiders, it takes a pretty impressive unit to kill the Gwaithir Arthan off quickly. The Hammer Guard would probably be the only unit in Angmar's roster to be able to do so, in addition to perhaps the Trolls.
They have lost half their men.
The Imladris Guardians, you can see here, the Elven Archers, once again, firing in the Noratino Warriors into the blob. Most of the Angmar army is shielded. I think they are going for the Hammer Guard, however, so again, that's exactly the right pick for BMK. BMK is going to need the support of a little bit more of Chisholm's infantry, I feel like. Purely because BMK's army is not the biggest in terms of its infantry power. And BMK might actually be the second Imladris army to fall if they're not careful. Although there goes an Angmar general. At the hands of the Elben general as well. Here are the Witch Realm Inquisitors from Inarius, and the Harumiro did get a charge off there. But it's not really the sort of battle they enjoy. They are Lancers after all, the Witch Realm Inquisitors, one of the best at fighting on horseback against other cavalry. Here are some Eldraenway Harry McKeel. Witch Realm Blackguard trying to get away from them, I think. Which again, I think the Hammer Guard would be okay against the Harry McKeel. Just by merit of their multiple HP. Balagos trying to get his Hammer Guard into the backlines to go after those Noratuno warriors, the Gwaithdy Rockdor. Yeah, BMK's army was smaller, and ultimately it does look as though he is going to be bowled over in the long run. Chisholm's army has taken up position right on the other side. He needs to start cycling around here and go up the same hill that Balagos moved up, I think. The bewildered Krogan is following him, interestingly enough, so I do think, actually, BMK's army will be defeated. Very interesting indeed. See, Witch Realm Inquisitors very depleted at this point, of course, and they really don't want to stay in melee for too long with Eldraenway Harry McKeel, otherwise they will lose yet more unit models, and they're very valuable on a unit like the Witch Realm Inquisitors. And another charge from the Eldraenway Harry Myro, so BMK doing yet more damage to vital targets in Morgoth's roster, or Morgoth's retinue, I suppose I should call them this time. And Balagos is most certainly, he's pushed onto this hill, and now the Noratuno warriors are in melee. That's a very unfortunate catch there. I noticed that was somewhere down here. Yeah, and assassinated there. The bewildered Krogan's general. Very unfortunate there. Those wargs managing to assassinate his general. Which that's just a matter of poor fortune. That you can't really account for that sort of thing. I mean, the knights may have been slightly exposed to a charge from the warg riders, which was not ideal. But even so, when you lose your general, and it's the first unit in the unit that falls, particularly in a unit strong as the Gwaithdy Rockdor, which you think should be able to take a charge, it's not necessarily the player's fault. It's just a bit of poor fortune and perhaps a bit of good positioning on the part of the player who is enacting the charge to sort of make sure the general takes the full force of it. Meanwhile, the Blackwatch Legion have thoroughly outclassed here. The Gwaithdy Arthand with a carpet of dead Scourge Raiders around them. Here comes BMK's Knights once again, however, going to get a very nice charge into the rear of these Blackwatch Legion. Skewered once again. Again, the Knights so powerful on the open field, but Angmar continuing to fight, and BMK's infantry force was a little bit too bare bones to withstand the brute strength. But I feel as though, considering Chisholm's infantry force was, barely touched, and the bewildered Krogans is now also coming across with a few units, including Haru Quinga, more archers for the front line, and also some Eldar Makar and some Imladris Guardians. They should be fine, although I'm a little bit confused as to why Chisholm's army is taking the route that it is. I mean, it's finally getting up here now. That should be the beginning of the end for Angmar, now that both the bewildered Krogan and Chisholm are getting their forces into position. Gwaithdy Arthand finishing off these Blackwatch Legion. Guardians of Khan, Doom and Hammerguard in here. The Eldar Makar coming to the aid of BMK's collapsing army, to be fair. But here we can see the Haru Quinga, Chisholm's forces. He was actually using the ammunition earlier on, so if they are out of ammunition, it's definitely the right call to get them into melee as quickly as possible. Try and kill off some of these unit models. That's a lot of Hammerguard in there. The Death Star of Hammerguard continuing to prove to be a real problem, and Imladris here taking casualties. Let's actually have a look at the percentage of kills. Yeah, I mean, Angmar's forces have taken a lot more losses than Imladris. Obviously, Imladris were very much designed to win this fight. Historically, they did, after all. Morgoth testing the strength of the elves, and they were not found wanting. Despite some rather bizarre positioning and sort of movement from Imladris, ultimately the quality of their armies was always going to be enough to see them over the line against these Angmar forces that were arrayed against them. And Angband will be put under siege. Quite the Arthan there. More cavalry on the way up, the Imladris Sentinels, I should say. Spear cavalry. getting some nice charges off. I've not seen the Bewildered Krogan before. It's always good to see a new player in the replays. Quite the rock door. At this point, they've been charging around so much that they are actually getting tired, which it takes a lot for Elven Knights to get tired. They do charge right into the Hammer Guard. They need to be careful though, because the Hammer Guard will give as good as they get in melee. They need to cycle out of there pretty quickly. You can see several unit bottoms falling there. Still a fairly chunky Angmar force up here, including Blackguard and Hammer Guard, backed up by Blackwatch Legion. More in Ladras Cav though. Eldark Winger potentially getting into a good position to start shooting. As Chisholm's army continues to move, he has now got his forces into position. He's got his Gwaith the Arthand over here as well. More Elder Enway units, which at this point, it's on clean-up duty now. Angmar's forces being scattered. Now we can see the Heroic Winger trying to shank these Hammer Guard. Another charge coming in. A joint charge from the Sentinels and the Gwaith the Rock Door. Trying to do what they can to kill them off. Let's see here, more Blade Masters, more Sentries as well, so yeah, all of the Imladris infantry that is now coming in, it's going to be far too much for Angmar to overcome, even with all of the Hammer Guard they got. The Elven units marching in formation, and in the style of Imladris, you know, few people would argue that Imladris have got the style. Those Blade Masters and the Sentries marching in formation. The noose is certainly tightening on the Angmar forces on this battle. Now we can see the Gwaith the Rock Door, Gwaith the Arthand as well. Yeah, Angmar have got very little left at this point, I think. They do have this sort of relatively strong blob of infantry, including Blackguard and Hammer Guard, trying to go after this Cav, but more of the Bewildered Krogan's forces are approaching, more Imladris Guardians, several units of them in fact, including some Eldar Makar. And there goes Inarius' general. Which around Blackguard, we've seen how powerful they can be. But here are the Gwaith the Arthand as well. Keepers of Aglos, I think, is going to be their name in the upcoming 0.97. Just to sort of, I think a lot of the sort of more heavy Elven names are going to be renamed to something a little bit more user-friendly, shall we say. Particularly when it comes to Mirkwood. Another charge in there, so at this point Angmar are pretty much entirely surrounded. I think that's the last of them.
If we continue like this, we behold how our cowardly
That's going to be the end of Inarius' army. And what's left of Belagost finds itself surrounded on all sides, although it is Hammer Guard and Blackguard largely, with a few Blackwatch Legion sprinkled in, so they will stand and fight to the death, and they won't go down too easily, even in the face of overwhelming Imladris opposition like this. Imladris have certainly been popular ones lately, and for good reason, because they are very, very strong, and everyone likes the elves, and I feel as though looks do matter, you know, fashion is important, and I feel as though Imladris can probably claim to have the best of the elven fashion, arguably. I've always been a bit of a fan of Lothlorien personally, but even still, Lothlorien we don't see a lot of actually, and I feel as though that is because they are the hardest of the elven factions to play, certainly in 0.96 and even in 0.97 actually. Imladris a little bit easier to play, purely because of their very strong, survivable infantry. Surrounded on all sides here, as Morgoth watches on. Not that he cares about the lives of his followers, I'm sure, but even so, the elves' strength has certainly not been found wanting, even if a couple of the elven generals did fall today. And Finrod's army in particular was largely destroyed. BMK also took a fair amount of casualties on his admittedly smaller army. But ultimately that was never going to be enough really to give Angmar the victory today. Surrounded on all sides by very angry looking elves. Banners of Angmar. See here that there's still basically 1,000 frames to go, which goes to show how resilient some of these higher tier Angmar units can be. But it is also worth saying that it's very rare that you'll see 5 or 6 units of Hammer Guard on the battlefield at one time, very much like the Misty Mountains battle before this one, where we saw so many units of Noldorin Guard and Wardens of Elostyria. Battles like this are the exception, not the rule. Also from an Imladris perspective as well, very strong armies overall. Interesting map as well, though. I feel as though this is the sort of map which would work pretty nicely in a free-for-all, with the sort of lower central sections with the encampments and the sort of higher ground and the trees. I feel as though there's potential there as well. Here are the Hammer Guard. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. I feel as though you would need more than Sun Tzu to get you out of this. Victory seems certain, and the Imladris force is just squeezing ever more tightly in. If the Gwythi Myrdain were here, this battle would probably be already over with their very nice AP. Look at all of those Imladris forces there. Probably going to be the thumbnail when I come to picking the thumbnail, though. All of those Imladris forces very densely packed together. Spears and pikes and swords all sort of pointing towards the enemy, just sort of pushing back. It's quite rare that you'll see the elves, the ones just sort of bullying the orcs into submission with their mass, but here that has most certainly been the case. And ultimately the trees, and this section of the battle was where all the action really happened. Bit of cav harass on that side. There was no fighting in the camps, which I'm maybe a little bit disappointed in, but also I understand very well why the elves did not want to go into the encampments, because it's the lower ground. It would have given Angmar sort of plentiful opportunities to use their range. Over here, let's have a look at the kills. So I'm not actually sure who is who, because obviously in a scenario it takes away the player names. Get my words out. But here we can see, I think that Belagos was the one that got perhaps more kills, because he didn't have as much in the way of... Well, actually, maybe not. Because he did have 2 units of wargs, and Inarius was the one that came in and did a huge amount of damage to Finrod's army. But even so, Angmar, sort of very even amounts of kills there. Having said that, 113 there. Men remaining, only 9 for one of them. Having a look at the elves, obviously, I think the 225, I think that was the bewildered Krogan, because as far as his reinforcements, they only really arrived when the battle was already over, unfortunately for him. So, you know, hopefully he can play in another battle where he gets to sort of play on the front foot, because it's always good to see new players. The rest of the elves all did relatively evenly, I suppose. Again, obviously the forces of Chisholm coming in the late game to sort of help clean up. BMK's reinforcements very much appreciated, I'm sure, even if Finrod's army was largely destroyed by the time they got there. Let's have a look. So, having a look at, I think this was Finrod's army, so Captain Larian. Looks as though the Imladris Blade Master did the best, and that's understandable, because in the melee engagement against Belagos forces, they did pretty well initially. But the rest of his army, obviously, when Inarius came in with the steel chair, not looking so healthy. Over here, this most certainly was, well, Gwythi Arthan, so this must have been Chisholm's army. The Heroic Wing are getting a ton of kills there, both units of them, so definitely the MVPs for him. Having a look down here, this was, I believe, yeah, this was the Bewildered Krogan, because obviously his forces didn't get as many kills as his peers, so not really any MVPs here, but the Gwythi Rockdor managing to break 50 kills at the very least. And then finally, obviously, we have BMK Overlord's army, and the Gwythi Rockdor getting nearly 600 kills. The Knights proving to be extremely potent, cycle charging in and out of those Angmar forces, getting tons and tons of kills. So yeah. Big thank you to Belagos for both making this scenario and sending this one to me. Obviously it wasn't the closest, but it was never really intended to be. Obviously this was a historical scenario, so don't shout at me for it not being close, but I'm sure people won't mind as much, because it was the elves this time that were laying a whooping on the orcs. And this is the way with a lot of these scenarios. Like a lot of the scenarios that are made, obviously, historically, or even in several RPs which are going on, like you may see another replay coming out of the sort of the mech series that they're doing, the clan, the Middle-earth Knights, that wasn't particularly close based on the armies and based on the situation that had arose from the RP. But you know, I don't know if I'm going to be doing that one. Again, I think the mech battles will probably be done by J Monster. Even so, this is the sort of, not all scenarios are made with sort of being this sort of very tight contest in mind. A lot of them are made for sort of the narrative purpose, or the sort of showcasing an event from what actually happened in Tolkien's lore, as this one was. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I know that Belagos has made a fair amount of scenarios which are sort of based around the history of Middle-earth, so we might be able to see a few more of them in the near future as well. Probably a few more of them which will be slightly closer as well, because this obviously was sort of a crushing victory for the elves, but we'll see. Again, there's always the potential for more people to make more things, and I'm always glad to see more people making scenarios. Obviously this one from Belagos, recently Dark Wolf and Vision have sort of taken on the mantle of making more scenarios as well. I think Horton's coming back as well to host a scenario relatively soon, so that'll be nice. Obviously, more scenarios is always good, more creativity going on. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next, which will probably be a siege from the official RP that's running at the moment, and I think it's a battle between the Woodland Realms and a coalition of the Misty Mountains and Isengard, and it's a siege as well. So I hope you will join me for that.